And good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for joining us. You're watching and listening to Talk Recovery Radio. I'm here with my co-host, Mr. Darren Gaylor. Hey, Darren.
Hello, everybody. Thanks for tuning in.
Yes. If you're tuning in on the radio, you're listening to us on 100.5 FM, Vancouver's Co-op Radio. And if you're seeing our lovely faces, then obviously you're on Facebook Live watching us. And we're running 1 week behind schedule on the radio. The station's closed due to this thing called COVID, Darren.
But it's all relevant. Even if whatever you're listening to, whatever the date is, whenever we did this show, it is all relevant. So keep tuning in on 100.5 FM.
And last week's show was pretty damn good. So for those of you that are listening to it right now, enjoy it. Talk Recovery Radio comes to you live every Thursday here, powered by New West Recovery, which is made up of Last Door Recovery Center and Westminster House, part of Canada's recovery community extraordinaire. Even during these times of COVID, we're still able to have a little sense of unity going on within the new people and our alumni and all that. So big shout out to Last Door and Westy House. You know, this time of year, we're obviously holidays. All of our shows were based last year on how to stay sober during the holidays. And this time there's a little bit of a twist, eh, Darren?
Yeah. I mean, this is strange. I think it's definitely a great topic. But how to keep busy, how to stay healthy, how to stay active, I think is a big part of that topic as well, right? Not just how to hang on through the holidays, because there's a lot of people hanging on, I'm sure, you know, and this is adding to the difficulty.
Yeah.
And you know, I want to get into the conversation of how do we see it more of an opportunity, you know, and I think both our guests today and the topics today are very relevant to how to use this time alone, you know, this pandemic situation, this isolation situation, a way of seeing it as an opportunity.
Well, yeah, so, I mean, before you had to stay sober during the holidays, now it's staying sober during holidays and COVID. You know, it seems like and COVID is now the new.
So it's more of a question of less of like the triggers of the holidays and what, you know, what's going to happen at the family dinners and things like that. It's more like, how do I cope with just so much time with myself or with my family or with the people I lived with more often and more concentrated in a smaller space.
I know, yeah.
Right?
That's going to be the second half of our show. We've got a guest that's going to be talking about staying sober during the holidays and COVID. So we're looking forward to that on the second half of the show. If you like what you're hearing and listening to and watching, you know, go to our archives page, talkrecoveryradio.com. All of our shows are there, hundreds of guests, thousands of listeners and viewers. Thanks to all of you who have helped make Talk Recovery a staple of the airways, where you can catch us on iTunes, SoundCloud, YouTube, and of course on Vancouver Co-op Radio's archive page as well. And Darren? I'd
like to throw something out for viewers and listeners right now. Well, I guess it's only specific to Facebook viewers. Throw out some ideas of what you're doing over the holiday break.
Good idea. Yeah.
I think you know, everything I was looking online. I mean, it does cost a little bit of money, which is fine. There are things to do, but what are some good ideas of using our environment? You know, using our geography, like what is there to do? Hit us up in the comments. That would be awesome. And as well, comment on the show. It's a good one. We get to talk recovery today with the author of Sober Curious, the Blissful Sleep, Greater Focus, Deep Connection, and Limitless Presence awaiting us all on the other side of alcohol. Let's welcome to the show, Ruby Warrington. Hello.
Hi there. Hey. How are you doing?
Doing great. Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you too. Sorry, I've got sunshine kind of shining right into my face, so it's a bit like,
Oh, you're so lucky you got sunshine.
But we have sunshine, yay.
Yeah. Where are you talking with us from?
I'm based in Williamsburg in Brooklyn.
Oh, cool. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So Sober Curious, this is the title of 2 books. One of which is called Sober Curious Reset, which is about to come out very soon.
It just came out.
Okay.
It's available in North America from December 1st. It comes out in the UK December 17th.
Okay.
So yeah, it's out this month.
So not just the title of your book. This, I mean, I've seen there was an ABC Nightline exclusive, Good Morning America, and then all of these like interviews and bars, pubs opening up that don't serve alcohol as a result of this like huge movement. Did you foresee that? Was that, I mean, did you see this happening, or like what's it like for you seeing what's come on out of this?
I mean, it's been incredible. I first started talking kind of really publicly about being sober curious myself back in 2016. The very beginning of 2016, I held my first kind of public facing event on this subject. And at the time I felt like, who's going to get this? What? Who's going to, like, I'm surely the only quote unquote normal drinker who is thinking I need to address my drinking. Like, really? And 100 people came to that first event. And I'm like, oh, okay. So this is a conversation that maybe is ready to be had. I'm not the only one, right? And I think that there have been many other voices kind of seeding this movement over the past sort of 5 years or so. And I think what Sober Curious helped to do, that terminology, that language, just helped to give people like a really good linguistic shorthand for what a lot of people have been thinking, experimenting with, talking about, questioning about with themselves for quite a long time. And now it's just all kind of handily captioned under this term Sober Curious, because that term is so open-ended. And I wanted to create something that felt really open-ended and therefore was very kind of very accessible to a large swaths of people who might have differing experiences, but could all relate to this thing of like, I feel really conflicted about my drinking or my other substance use, right? Yeah.
I can imagine. I come from like an alcoholic's perspective, one of which is like, if you're not an alcoholic, like, why would you ever consider not drinking? Like, if you can manage, your drinking and it's not causing any, damage like I've experienced, why even bother? But I guess between alcoholic, like accepted and admitted alcoholic, to absolutely no problem drinking, there's a very gray or middle ground of people that maybe they know many of people that have passed away as a result of some form of alcohol sickness, and are just questioning their health, their maybe a weekend of bad habits as a result of the alcohol. I mean, that is a large number of people. Like, everybody at some point is questioning, do I need to go to the gym? Do I need to stop smoking? Do I need to, like, as we grow up? And so
Absolutely.
this has taken on like a huge movement, really, of people wanting to be healthier. Is that?
I think that's part of it. And I think part of it is like, we've had for a very long time a very kind of clear-cut idea around what problem drinking looks like. And it looks like the absolute extreme. You mentioned there's this spectrum, right? I like to think of it more as a rainbow spectrum than a kind of just a boring old gray area. I'm like, we're all somewhere in this rainbow, right? And we've associated problem drinking with the very extreme, which is like, yeah, I'm waking up in the gutter covered in my own vomit and I don't know where I spent the past 2 days. Right. Or whatever the version of extreme problem is. When actually, on that spectrum of problem drinking, a study came out a couple of years ago that identified sort of 5 sort of official levels of problem drinking. And level 1 was like severe hangovers. And I think any drinker at some point, well, the vast majority, let's say, of drinkers at some point have experienced a really extreme hangover that meant they probably couldn't do much the next day, or they were, being sick the next day, or whatever it was. And so I think what's happening in a way is that our idea around what constitutes problem drinking is broadening. And so I think what prevented a lot of people from potentially getting help for their drinking before, people who needed it potentially, was because that rock, they hadn't hit that rock bottom. So they thought, well, that doesn't apply to me, so I'm not welcome there. So there's nothing for me there. When actually, I know lots of people who've, you know, had similar drinking history to mine, who found their way to AA and have really resonated with the programs there and the support and the teachings there. And that's great. But I think there's been a big barrier to entry for people just because of our perception around what problem drinking is. And so part of what I try to do with Sober Curious is say, well, actually define problem, because maybe we've all experienced more problems with drinking than we'd like to actually admit, you know?
So this is this is amazing for the process of questioning and considering before the massive consequence or before it gets worse.
Yeah.
Because I mean, that's oftentimes when you're dealing with the alcoholic it's out of a really bad few years, bad night, it's been brutal. And this is allowing people, like, just the idea of sober curious, just the notion of it, like those two words put together, gives us permission to question ourselves, the habits, before it gets to that point where maybe I'd rather hide it, maybe I'd rather deny it, lie about it, get into that cycle.
Right.
So I'm wondering, like, maybe you haven't quantified this, but for all the people and all the conversations and people that have contacted you, like, how many began this process, maybe quit for a little while and said, I have more fun drinking, versus the people that were just like surprised and shocked and amazed by how much better their life was?
I don't have any official sort of statistics. I can't give you percentages or numbers around that, but anecdotally, and this came up in a conversation with someone yesterday, I haven't actually met anyone who's quit for an extended period with the intention of really examining, like, what's actually going on here, who has wanted to go back to the way that they were drinking before. The majority of people, I would say, and this maybe even mirrors what you see of people going kind of in and out of recovery, go into recovery, relapse, maybe then have a longer period of sobriety, may relapse again, maybe not. But I think that the majority of people will take an extended break, be extremely pleasantly surprised, not only how easy it is for them once they get past the initial hump, if their addiction hasn't got that deeply entrenched yet, as you say. We call these early exiters.
Okay.
So very pleasantly surprised about, hey, this actually feels really good. But because the social conditioning is so intense that alcohol is what feels good, it can take a repeated number of goes around to begin to trust your own lived experience over all of the kind of messaging you're getting outside, whether it's from your social group or your family or just society at large, and the kind of advertising and marketing messages that we get around alcohol. Right. So you have to you're kind of overriding very deeply ingrained neural pathways just around kind of like what our expectations around drinking. You almost have to like prove to yourself repeated times, no, it does feel better not to drink. Oh, it does feel better not to drink. And so, yeah, like I said, the majority of people will take a break, maybe then take a longer break, will dip back in, realize, oh, actually, that doesn't feel as good as I remembered it to feel. Maybe I don't need it. And then it typically kind of like peters off. I know a lot of people who got sober curious who now don't drink at all. I also know people who got sober curious and were like, this is really hard. That tells me a lot about the way I've been drinking. I think I do need a 12-step program, and have found their way then to other paths of recovery where there's more support, you know? So it's
something that really kind of nailed it is redefine what's the problem. Right. Because, from my own personal story and I'm sure Darren's and many of us, like, we finally had this moment where it's just like, I can't believe I did that, and you're redefining, like, there are decades of me drinking. I never thought it was a problem. I look back now and I'm like, that was like really reckless, careless, dangerous behavior. Like, it was a problem. And I remember when I first came into recovery years ago, I'd be like, oh, my life wasn't that bad up until 2 years ago, and like, it was bad when I was 18, to be honest with you. But I didn't just come up with that on my own. Like, I had to do what you're saying. And I had to, I'm in a 12-step program. So I did certain step work to help me realize that. So how does Sober Curious, like the book, does it help one identify? Because here's a big thing, and I'll get you to answer that. I was talking to a dad who would drink and thought, it's not affecting my kids. And it's just like, well, like your dad doesn't, like the kid doesn't want to see you drunk, and all that kind of stuff. And now they get, yeah, that's a problem. So, and that didn't happen like over a minute, like that happened over some time. So how does Sober Curious help somebody figure that out? Or do you have any tips on helping someone?
Right. So the first book kind of like lays out the whole kind of philosophy of what it means to be sober curious, which in a kind of like soundbitey nutshell is being sober curious means literally being curious or questioning every invitation, every expectation, every impulse to drink. So anytime that alcohol kind of like comes up, whether it's expected of you to drink on a certain occasion, whether you have a desire or an inclination to drink, you question, okay, what's going on here? Do I need this drink? So I kind of bring up different questions that you might ask yourself throughout the book, whilst also just kind of unpacking when you take yourself out of what I call the dominant drinking paradigm and instead adopt this kind of observer's questioning mind, which is what we learn how to do in meditation, for example. Like there's the kind of higher I that's kind of observing scientifically almost what's going on. So I encourage people to get into that mindset just by taking a shift of like, I'm going to observe what's happening here in these drinking situations. Once you start to do that, you realize there are so many strange paradoxes around drinking, like so many things that we just accept blindly without question that then become normal in our lives when actually they're not normal at all. And when we do take ourselves out of the paradigm and we are able to kind of like look what's going on so dispassionately and assess what's really happening, we notice that, oh, okay, so maybe it's not all quite so benign and unproblematic as I had been kidding myself into believing. And so Sober Curious, the original book, kind of like unpacks lots of that different stuff. For example, there's a chapter called The Nature of the Beast, which really breaks down like what alcohol actually is and how we use it. And it kind of sets up with the thing of like, hey, what if we're actually all addicted to alcohol? Because guess what? This is one of the 5 most addictive substances that there is. It's marketed to us very heavily from the age that we're really old enough to understand what it is. And it also fulfills a very, very basic kind of biological function for us. Like it's human nature to either seek out things which bring us pleasure or help us to avoid pain, right? Bring us closer to feeling more alive or further away from our fear of death, ultimately. And here is alcohol, this substance which readily available, heavily marketed to us, extremely addictive for our brains that appears to do this biological function, fulfill this biological need of ours. It's no wonder that we're all so into alcohol. And so once I get people into the mindset of like, maybe I am addicted to alcohol. Oh, it doesn't look like what I thought addiction was. Then people are ready to start really questioning what's going on. So I kind of set that all up in the first book. And then the Sober Curious Reset, which just came out, takes you through 100 days of not drinking. You know, a lot of people do a dry January now. Sober September is a thing. Sober October is a thing. There's dry July in Australia. It's like pick a month and someone's not drinking. Yeah. But I'm like, actually, a month is not really, you can kind of hold your breath and just like white knuckle it through a month. Like if you want to do like a detox. 100 days, however, that's a long time to go on willpower alone. And you're really going to be asked to just kind of like relax a bit into it. So the Sober Curious Reset gives people a specific question to consider every day, some kind of insight around that, and then an exercise that they can do. And so it's something that you can do on your own. It's super interactive. And it just really helps you very, very intentionally question every single aspect of your drinking. Not only your drinking, but our drinking and the way that we use alcohol as a society also. So it's designed to be more of a kind of programmatic approach, which I highly advise find someone to do this with, so you can share that, so you can have someone mirroring back to you what's going on. And in the same way as you might have a sponsor in the 12-step programs. So yeah, I tried to bring a more kind of programmatic element because I felt like that was something that was missing from the original book.
I'm curious, how's the book sales, let's say, in this course of the pandemic? Because I hear a lot of the struggle, like, you know, here in Vancouver, BC, overdose deaths, not specifically in alcohol, but they're rising. Domestic abuse, people are struggling in this isolation, more. But I always think about the opportunity that it's also providing us. And I wonder if, do you think there are a lot of people taking this as an opportunity and questioning, I would imagine questioning these types of behaviors at this point, especially over the holidays as well. They're sort of forced to look, as they're holding Bailey's coffee at 11 a.m. about to get to work on their laptop, whereas they never did that before because they'd be driving to work or sitting at the office, let's say. I mean, do you see movement in this already, or do you maybe expect this a little later?
I think that this situation, as with so many areas of our lives, has really shone a light on a lot of our kind of unconscious behaviors, unconscious beliefs. Like lots of the stuff that we've just been doing on autopilot for years, decades, is now been disrupted. And so I think that a lot of people are seeing the way they drink through a very different lens. For example, someone who might have considered themselves largely a social drinker and not seen that be a problem, even if they're drinking every night, is now drinking it every night at home on their own. Whereas that is probably something they would have considered to be quote unquote problem drinking, whereas they're drinking the same amount of alcohol, right?
Right.
So I think there are probably a lot more people questioning their drinking and seeing it through a not very forgiving light.
Right.
However, whether they're actually addressing it in this situation, which is so highly intensely pressurized, where people are craving any kind of escape they can get, and ta-da, here's alcohol for that. Like, I wonder I wouldn't surprise me if people are drinking more and feeling more conflicted about it.
Okay.
Both those things probably.
I like this because everyone talks about, and we talk about this on our show quite a bit, and at least I bring it up. There's so much stigma when people talk about stigma about addiction. So much stigma talk about, the idea of being an addict or alcoholic or someone who uses drugs. But I've always said there's more stigma and more issues on the idea of not using. Like the idea of not drinking is like, what? Why wouldn't you drink? Like at all? And like the idea of being sober, the idea of being clean, whatever you want to label yourself, like you have to defend that in circles, at family dinners, at weddings, and I think that's a huge issue. Like the government's making alcohol an essential service. Because the idea of not drinking during COVID would be like a horrible idea. So I want to thank you for just having a foot in the door, talking about, hey, just the idea of being sober. Like you don't have to be sober forever. Just be a little curious about it. It's okay to be curious.
Okay, not to drink.
Yeah,
I think a t-shirt came out a couple of years ago, and it just said, "It's okay not to drink," and it's like, whoa, newsflash!
It was a newsflash for me. Like if you would have told 20-year-old Giuseppe, in the places I was hanging out in Detroit, Michigan, not to drink, like I would have just scoffed at you, because there was no messaging in my growing up that that's even an idea. There really wasn't. At least I don't ever remember hearing it. So, and you made it to Good Morning America. You've made it everywhere, which is great. Were you like anticipating that kind of a response? It's always great to get it, but pretty wild, eh?
No. I mean, honestly, like the book came out New Year's Eve 2018. So it kind of hit the ground running with it like January 1st, 2019. By the summer of 2019, I was completely burnt out. I'm like, if someone asked me another question about Soba Curious, I think I'm just going to like pass out here on the spot, because I've like talked about this, like, which was amazing to see it take off in that way. But like I said, I think it was much more like I created this phrase that gave people permission to talk about something that's been bubbling for a long time. And there are so many other factors, be it other authors who've had books that have come out, be it this whole industry of alcohol-free products like drinks that's now been coming onto the market.
That was Jared, everybody.
Hey, Jared.
Yeah, you can
So
say
I
hi
think
there.
that, oh, hi. So yeah,
live show,
of course, as an author, like I write books because I have ideas that I think can serve the world, and I want people to talk about the things that I'm interested in, and for my ideas to be discussed. And so of course it's very gratifying to see all of that happen, largely though because I see almost this kind of out breath among certain people who are like, finally I can talk about this, you know, finally I don't have to feel like this is a taboo subject. And it still is very taboo. And, you know, to your point, Darren, about like, are people using this as an opportunity to not drink now, to actually take a break? And kind of, I think that on the flip side, for people who have largely used alcohol as a way to mitigate social anxiety, for example, which is definitely was always my thing. I'm a natural introvert. I haven't actually minded being in lockdown at all. It's been quite relaxing for my nervous system in many ways. I think that for some people, like having this sort of enforced period of social isolation and distancing has been a relief, because they've been able to sort of be like, I don't really want to drink anyway, and now I don't, and now there's so much less pressure to drink from other people, you know.
Well, I think, you know, in between the, you know, I don't have a problem whatsoever to complete alcoholic, I believe truly that there are situational alcoholics, if you will. You know, people who experience a tragedy, you know, somebody passes away or something like this pandemic, their drinking goes up. And unconsciously, when things sort of level out, it goes back down. Like, it doesn't take over their lives. But those are the moments, if somebody can sort of be sober curious, have something to read, have this, you know, this movement or group of people that understand and agree, and these experiences of, and I think it was your quote, I wrote it down, you can't know just how much of an impact not drinking can have on your life until you've stopped, you know. And it's so,
very
like,
good point.
we never give ourselves that chance to just say, is this thing that I'm doing, you know, what's keeping me from growing, keeping me from like stepping out the door and achieving goals? Is it keeping me, you know, is it causing more damage in the long run?
Yeah. Is it just making me feel more anxious and depressed on a very basic level? This is like something that we use to elevate our mood, whilst we all know, we all know that actually it makes us feel so much worse, like in the long run, you know? Yeah.
And I wonder, you know, for the similarities, like somebody who's been smoking their whole life, you know, there's no stigma with, yeah, I quit smoking. Everybody's like, right on. Like, exactly. But for some reason, alcohol, it's like, oh, what are you going to do with your life? Like, how can we be friends? Because I think there's much more social, you know, dynamics involved with alcohol specifically. But somebody who's smoking joints, I wouldn't say specifically somebody who's hooked on heroin or crack or anything like that, but, you know, marijuana smoking, can they translate the book, you know, in the same way? Is it specified solely to alcohol?
I talk about alcohol largely because that was my thing and I have the most experience there. And I also think it's the most widely used substance. But yes, absolutely. You could apply it to marijuana for sure. You could apply it to probably food, like sugar food. You could probably apply it to social media, anything that you're using to not feel something or to change the way you feel. Like, because a lot of what I talk about, particularly in the Sober Curious Reset, is really guiding people through multiple different exercises and different doorways into looking at, like, why am I using this thing? Which often will come down to, I want to feel less of this and I want to feel more of this. And then it's like looking at why, like, what are the deep whys? And then from there, well, what other ways can I feel less of this and more of this? And a lot of that comes down to, well, you actually need to feel more of this. You know, it's asking to be felt, and your work is to be able to sit with whatever's uncomfortable or difficult for you to feel and find a way to process that, whether it's in therapy, whether it's through journaling, whether it's just through deep introspection, whether it's through spiritual practice, whatever that thing that is for you, you know? So any substance that you're using to alter your state, to numb out, or to dial up the volume on feelings that you do want to feel, you could apply the same sort of like techniques and questioning too, I think.
Right. The philosophy of, do I need this? What is it,
Why? Yeah.
What am I avoiding, throughout? But I do appreciate it. It's fair to say, when somebody considers abstaining from alcohol for a period of time, there is a huge replacement of habits and environments and social, events and relationships, more so than should I not drink coffee anymore?
Yeah, because alcohol is so interwoven. It's such a social lubricant.
Right.
I mean, would our social, if you think about like the whole structure of our socializing as a society, if alcohol was removed from the equation, would probably look completely different. Like the entire hospitality industry as we know it would look completely different, as it does in
good food.
Right, and coffee, and like, as it does in country, like dry countries, it's like it would just be a very different social environment.
So if somebody wants to grab your book, learn more information, grab your new book, do you have a website? What do they search for?
So I am sober curious around my social media use. So I'm on Instagram sometimes. We're on Facebook. There is a Sober Curious Facebook group, and I'm going to be encouraging the Sober Curious group to kind of do the 100-day reset together starting January 1st. So if people are curious about doing 100 days with a group of other people, that's going to be happening in the Sober Curious Facebook group. My personal Instagram is @RubyWarrington. And the book, I will direct people to Amazon at this point. It's just the most kind of accessible way to get hold of books. So it's available on Amazon. Yeah.
So if you're watching us or listening to us and you think your friend, asking for a friend, or you think yourself, don't want to go to rehab, don't want to go to treatment, ain't doing AA, ain't going to do that, not going to church basements. Okay. Why don't you try this, Sober Curious, check it out. If you don't have a problem, and you can do Sober Curious and be a happy life, then congratulations. And then if this, you're still having blackouts in the middle of your sober curiosity, then maybe rehab might be something you want to check out. So prove us wrong. So that's the tip for today for any loved ones out there that may be suffering or just curious.
Yes, thank you so much for having me on. This has been great to meet you guys.
Thank you very much. Again, Ruby Warrington, the book is Sober Curious and Sober Curious Reset. Check that out. Thank you very much, Ruby.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you, Ruby, for being on the show. We'll keep in touch and we'll take a look at your new book and then do a follow-up interview.
Thank you. Bye.
Okay, take care. Bye-bye.
And we are on Talk Recovery, Vancouver Co-op Radio, CFRO 100.5 FM, and also live on Facebook. And we're coming right at you with our second guest.
Yes, we got our second guest. We're talking to Leanne. Hi, Leanne. How are you?
I'm doing awesome. How are you guys doing?
We're doing good. You got this thing going on called Sober City. Found it online. I was like, what's that about? And then I realized you're from Halifax.
Yep.
And I was just in Halifax last year. And, part of the recovery movement in Halifax. So shout out to Jordan who books our shows. I was like, Jordan, we got to get her on the show. So I think we have a common friend, Jules.
Yes, we do. Oh, that's nice.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. So Leanne, tell me all about this Sober City. What is it?
Sure. Well, I only just launched January 1st, 2020. So, it's barely even a year old, but basically it's a website, a blog, and a community here in Halifax. And it's all about, things to do that don't involve alcohol in the city. There's resources, there's more like a support network as well within Sober City. And it's mostly, for people in the Halifax area and Nova Scotia. Eventually I will be expanding, but right now it's just local because it's only a year old. And yeah, it's mostly geared towards people who are newly sober or who are sober curious, or those who just occasionally, take a month off here and there. So it's pretty much for everybody, I'd say.
So
Yeah,
sorry, go ahead, Darren.
There's a list of books that you recommend for people on the website, and our previous guest, Sober Curious, that book was in one of your lists.
Oh,
yeah, which, I mean, is that, like, obviously we spoke about this movement. Are you part of that movement? Like, how did it, come to be where it's like, you're not doing 12-step, calls, interventions, but it's just like this resource to help people that are in that area of consideration and questioning. How did you come to be with that?
Yeah, and I think, like, it sort of seems like, I don't know if it's just because I'm biased, but it seems like there's a lot of other people jumping on the sober curious train or getting sober. And I feel like it's just a coincidence that I happen to be here in the same space at the same time. I got sober almost 7 years ago. It'll be March 2nd, 2014 was my sober date. Okay. So, and at that time, I went to AA for the first year every week. Yeah. And I noticed when the meeting was over, and I wanted to stick around and, like, talk to people about recovery and, like, how they were doing and stuff, but everyone would leave immediately after this. So I'm just, like, by myself. So I'm like, I wish there was other people around I could talk to, or because, I mean, we're never alone. We know that, but it feels like we are when we first get sober. So that was a huge thing, and why I created Sober City, even though it took years because I only just launched. So I was like 6 years sober when it launched, but I was like, okay, it's time. Like it has to come. And it seems to be really good timing because of the Sober Curious movement too.
And also COVID, I mean, people don't know what to do, and it seems like everything's over, and what's there to do, and being able to connect with people using social media and online tools is really important. One of the reasons why I wanted to get you on the show too is, inspire other people. Our show gets viewed across the country, and if you're sitting at home waiting for the world to entertain you, I got news for you. You need to entertain yourself, and here's a perfect example of somebody who's taking life on and trying to build that community where the need is. So good for you on that. So do you have any, there's many people in small cities all over the country that are feeling like they're alone. Even though they're not alone, they feel alone. What gave you the ability? Like, I mean, yeah, it took you 6 years. Good ideas take a while to happen. So what did you do? Like, how did you, did you talk about the traditions? Did you worry about anonymity? Did you worry about, letting everybody know that you're in recovery or sober or was an alcoholic, all that kind of stuff?
Yeah, and it did feel that way, and for the first year, of course, because I was going to AA, and I knew that you don't say that you're going to AA in that time, and I understand why. Even still now, when I don't really go that often, I get it. So during that first year, I told some close friends. I didn't really make it public, and that's okay. For me, it made sense at the time. But I've had so much, like, new knowledge in my head and so much new optimism that I wanted to share it with people. So I actually made a YouTube channel. That was the first way I reached out to people, was through YouTube. And I still have it. It's just not related to Sober City, even though it's all about alcohol recovery. So I started with that because it was worldwide. No one in my city knew. So it was a way that I was able to, like, talk about recovery and tips and share my story to the world. And because I was like, I got to keep things quiet because my job or, friend circles here, I don't want people, like, the city to know. And then 6 years, I was like, screw it, man. I want to share the message of sobriety is possible. Recovery is possible. It's not boring. It's not anything to be ashamed of. So then I'm like, I got to bring this to my community.
I have a question. I mean, I could have asked the author of Sober Curious. I appreciate your beginnings, and it leads me to wonder, this is sort of an ideology for people questioning. Like we spoke earlier, it's not like there's no reason to question if you're pounding 3 Mickeys a day, you've just been kicked out of your house by your wife, if, for example, or you've been fired by work. Like, sober curious, now you need help. So I'm curious because, there's a lot of denial, stigma, unwillingness, laziness, self-centeredness with people that, are sort of alcoholics or need more help. Let's say there is somebody that just doesn't want to do the work or can't think of abstinence, for the rest of their lives, and they're looking for an out, and they hear of this sober curious movement, and it's going to cause more damage if they don't really have a committed presence with abstinence or whatnot. Like I think we need to talk about this, not because I agree or disagree, but I think that there's going to be people that are looking for the excuse, the easy way out, right? And I'm just, not that you're the ruler of this answer, but like with your idea, like it sounded like you gracefully made the attempt. It wasn't going to cause any more harm if you did 12 steps less, and that there's a big priority in the sober curious and in your resource and your website to help people acquire other things to do other than drink, which is amazing. So what would you say to somebody that shouldn't, just be sober curious?
Yeah.
Can I ask you that?
I get it, because I got that question recently by someone who came up. He's like, hey, I know you do Sober City, so like, can I chat with you for a bit? It happens a lot. I'm like, sure, of course. And knowing this person, knowing that they are deeply in active addiction, and I know, I can't say I know because I don't know, I'm not them, but from the outside looking in, I can tell that they have a massive problem with it, and that they really would do a world of good for them and all of the people in their life if they were to quit completely.
Right.
But of course, I'm not about to say that. So when they say that, when they come up to me and ask me for advice or whatever, or say, I'm really struggling and what do I do? And of course, I'll say, and it's funny too, because they always add in like, so how much did you used to drink before you quit, to try to gauge, like if they're thinking, am I really an alcoholic? What Leanne says is probably going to determine that. So if I say, I didn't drink every day, sometimes I did, sometimes I didn't, then in their mind, they're like, oh, thank God, I don't drink every day, I'm good. So I usually try to preface it. Any kind of conversation I have with someone it's not the volume, it's why. Why are you drinking? How do you feel afterwards? And so when that person did approach me, I said that, and I said, it probably would be a good idea to start with, maybe a month off to see how you feel. So it's just easier to broach the subject of, hey, look at your alcoholism with a sober curious approach. Because I know for me, 8 years ago, the seeds were planted that I should probably stop soon, but I wasn't about to. It was a horrifying thing to imagine what my life would be like without alcohol. So I did the month off thing, and then I could really see that, okay, I have a problem. So for me, doing the sober curious thing, honestly, I only did it for like 3 months, where I took a month off, tried it again, only made it 2 weeks, and then that was it. So it's an easy way to bring it up to people, really.
Yeah, I mean, I guess you've assumed a little bit responsibility in that sense, where people are asking you for advice and help, and I get it. It's easy if it's just like somebody with like, they've surpassed the change, and they're abstinent based on choice, and they feel good about life, and they're like, hey, you got some ideas of what to do over the holiday? Like, those are easy conversations, right? So I I mean, I'm in that same boat where I feel like it's not about the risk of drinking anymore. You know, I'm not scared of life, you know, of what to do now that I'm not drinking. But like, I know people who, you know, didn't need to go to treatment and basically for personal health reasons decided to quit, and they have a pride along with it. Like they have a clean date, the same as, you know what I mean? But they don't go to meetings and things like that. And, you know, there's a social circle around them that's like, hey, good for you. Like that was nothing but a healthy, good decision. But, you know, like we talked before, like this change of lifestyle, right? Like is,
You know, I'm just gonna jump in. I think too, water levels itself out. Like nobody accidentally or mistakenly shows up at an AA meeting, and nobody accidentally, mistakenly, you know, finds sober curious and does the 30-day challenge or whatever they call it. You know, and no, somebody is interested in sober city. Like we all, life shows up, and I really believe like if somebody. You know, there's this idea that we're not accountable for our choices, you know, and yeah, addiction is a disease, and I don't want to get into that conversation that addiction's a choice, because that's just going to blow up in my face. But at the end of the day, and I don't know about you two, I decided to relapse. I decided to pick up. It had nothing to do with trauma, family, like it had nothing. Like I was, like I did it. And so I like the idea of these sober cities showing up, because it gives a space for those who don't want to do this. Because I think that's what we're lacking, is that middle ground. And if sober city, sober curious works, that's like they say it in the, I don't do AA either, by the way, but like in AA, our hats are off to you. Like, congratulations. And like, I'm glad for you. But if it doesn't, you know, these seats are welcome. And that's what we need to figure out, how to do the warm handoffs. Because I don't know about you in Halifax, but we don't have the warm handoffs here in BC. You either go to consumption sites, you go to harm reduction, you go to abstinence supported environments, and everyone's fighting. I wouldn't say it's about ego. It's really about funding. It's just like, I need all the people to come to me so I can get the funding. Do you feel that in how, I'm curious, is that what it's, we got some time, yeah. What's going on in Halifax on the other side of the country? Are you feeling there's, because there's a war between healthcare approaches for addiction in BC. It's an all out war. And I'm not making that up. Like I've got experience from stakeholder meetings. Do you feel that in Halifax? Are you even involved in that? Because, well, you are, because you did Recovery Day, so.
Yeah, exactly. And of course, I know Jules would be able to touch on it a lot more than I am, because from where I'm at with Sober City, I haven't had much interaction, or really any, honestly, with you know, Nova Scotia Health and Addiction Services. I have experience with them when I first got sober. I went to them, and my experience is so much different than what I usually hear. Because I feel like I lucked out, and I got a counselor, an addictions counselor, and she was great. But one of the people in the Sober City community group, she has over a year, she, you know, started to think relapse thoughts, and she wanted to reach out, you know, be proactive. So she reached out to well, I think it was Nova Scotia Addictions and Mental Health Services. And, you know, basically she was told, you have to be currently relapsing in order for us to help you. So I can definitely see there's a lack of something going on there. I don't know what it is. And I'm not fully in on that side.
You gotta have the shovel in your hand, dig in the hole before we're like, hey, stop digging. You know,
the lack of common sense it just seems to be across the board, right? And that's where you guys step in.
Yep. Yeah. So it's like the government funded stuff. I'm like, it's great when it works, but I find, yeah, in Halifax, there's a lot of issues with it as well. Definitely. And I've had bad experiences too, just like anyone else. Yeah.
So your Recovery Day was the first Recovery Day in Halifax this past September. How did you feel?
I think it's amazing because, well, Jules created it and ran the whole thing, and it was great. I just co-hosted day one because it was a 2-day event that of course had to be online. So I co-hosted day one, and it was so awesome to be part of it. Because even though it was online, so it didn't reach as many people, I know that it's huge that it was recognized by the mayor, and it's a recognized day now, and I got to be part of the first one. It's again, it's a building block towards, ending the stigma and making it normal that, people don't drink. How about, like, it's a thing. Yeah, you can go your life without drinking or doing, patio beers in the summer. It's possible, so it's really cool that it's starting to become a thing. Yeah. And BC, you guys started it, eh?
Well, it's a big team effort, that's for sure. I met Jules in Halifax when I was there for a conference that we were hosting where I worked last door. We did the conference. I was like, hey, who are you? And she's like, I'm Jules. I'm like, hey, next thing you know, Recovery Day Halifax. It's like, yay. But yeah, Dara's the MC. I'm the chair of Recovery Day, and we keep ourselves busy. Yes.
Cool.
Like you said, it is amazing, and how there just isn't a natural human reaction to somebody's sobriety or questioning it. It's like we all just give a pat on the back when we know it's been awful, and you've been brutal, and and now you're not anymore. So there's a pat on the back for that. But the pre-conversations before that happens, like to actually be turned down for help before is just, it does not surprise me, which is sad.
Right.
And then it's like, when you do tank your life, we'll have these just absolutely insane resources for you that you of course are going to be ashamed of being a part of, probably, and that's that window of somebody's life, whether or not they see actual hope in that being clean, being sober part, where it can be how we describe it now. And like I said, that common sense, like the people independently stepping in, doing what you're doing, like having those conversations, being a resource. I think we should be running the show.
We probably do a better job of it. We show up. Sobercity.ca is the website. And here, if you're in Halifax, some things to do, be part of the Sober City. So what do you want people to do when they come to your website?
Sure. Well, there's, I guess, 3 main parts. I mean, find support. That's the regular resources that you would find to help. There's on here is where I would post, to our Facebook group. We do Sunday meetups every Sunday in the morning for an hour to chat with whoever wants to join. So we host that as well through Zoom, but also on the website. Of course, advice articles like how to build a sobriety toolkit and things like that. And what took me an insane amount of time is under the eat and drink, I made like a restaurant bar guide where I analyzed, that big one right there. I analyzed every bar and restaurant in HRM. Like I analyzed their menus, and I basically broke it down into like, do they serve alcohol? Do they serve mocktails? Do they have kombucha, and do they have any extras?
This is brilliant, because is there a thing like, are they nice to you if you don't buy wine? Is there a column there?
There should be, right?
Because I have a famous saying, we do a lot of fundraising for addiction recovery, and everybody thinks we want stale bread or leftover food. It's like, no, like I eat steak on Friday,
Yeah.
Like I hate going to restaurants where they like, oh, no wine, and they kind of scurry away, which the Keg is one of those places. I'll put a shout out to the Keg there. They need to do some training on that, but I had a bad experience there. So this is great. So you're looking at restaurants that are sober, curious, friendly.
Yeah, exactly. And because I also want to praise the establishments who actually have something more for us than a Shirley Temple. please stop serving me Shirley Temples and pop. Like, we need more options.
Oh
So,
no, wait, cranberry and soda.
oh my God, like, sure, it's good, but like, come on.
Yeah,
We're
yeah.
out here too. There's a lot of sober people out here. And I'm sure the same as out there for you guys. Like, there's a lot of menus that just straight up don't have any non-alcoholic options on there. So when I look at that menu, I'm giving you a 0 for that. So you got to step your game up.
What a great idea. So if you're in BC or you're in Halifax or you're in some other province in Canada, great idea. I don't have time to do this. I wouldn't mind going to every restaurant in Vancouver area, I guess. But what a great idea. Hopefully it inspires somebody else to do this too. Like which restaurants are sober curious? Big issue. Like we're hospitality industry, you know, it's all about money, I guess. You're not
Well,
buying
I mean,
wine.
just the consideration factor, I think, is what you spoke to about, Leanne. Like, I mean, even in just the family home or you're visiting for dinner and it's like, oh, all I have is wine or apple juice. Like, you know what I mean?
Sure, that happened to me. I was so embarrassed.
I think that's where a lot of their stigma comes from. Yeah. Is that that's what we experience. And if more people who didn't have the problem just had an option. I mean, it's not like that person is trying to hide and the fact that they're a recovering alcoholic and needing to hide behind but we're adults. We want to be social. Like, you know, to hold a juice box.
I was offered milk.
The juice box is demeaning in a sense. And I love the fact that if there's something on the menu, then it's almost you are being specifically considered for your health choices in your life.
Yep.
And
that's amazing. Way to get out there on that. That's so
way to go, Leanne. Thank you so much for joining us, Leanne. Sobercity.ca. Inspire other people in other cities to do the same. This is great. Maybe you can connect with other people in different provinces, inspire them with this.
Definitely.
Like
Thank you, Leanne, for being on the show. Say hi to Jules for me. That would be great. And you're listening to Talk Recovery Radio. We're online here on Facebook, obviously, with Zoom share because of COVID, but you're also catching us on air, 100.5 FM, Vancouver Co-op Radio. Thanks for tuning in on there. Thanks for viewing. And Talk Recovery Radio is powered by New West Recovery, which is made up of Last Door Recovery Center and Westminster House, Canada's recovery community. Next Thursday, I think we got another show, and then we're going to holiday break for a couple of weeks. So thanks to all the viewers and listeners. Leanne, once again, thanks for being on the show. Darren, always good to see you.
And to our first guest, Ruby Warrington. Thank you very much.
All right, everyone. Thank you. Take care, everyone.
Yeah.
Bye.